A while ago, we produced a video about perfectly innocent games with rude names. Eyebrows were raised, smirks were smirked, and even some childish giggling was heard from those with a penchant for finding alternate meanings in innocuous phrases. Fun, in short, was had by all. That was only the tip of the cheeky iceberg, however, as unintentionally saucy innuendos are rife in the gaming world. You just have to dig around a bit to find them. As such, we decided to leave all sense, maturity, and decorum at the door once again, and scoured the halls of gaming history for anything that tickled our funny bones, even if it probably shouldn't have. So if you too like to revel in a bit of harmless immaturity from time to time, you're in luck, because we're back to celebrate even more humorous, titillating, and occasionally upsetting game titles that probably weren't intended as such. I'm the unintentionally vulgar Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 more perfectly innocent video games with rude names. Number 10. Booby Kids. This 1987 action game for the NES gives players the unique opportunity to step into the shoes of one of the titular Booby Kids. Throw all sense and caution to the wind and accept this opportunity, and you'll explore maze-like levels across different eras. You'll trek through prehistoric times, feudal Japan, and even the distant future as you enthusiastically seek out and uncover the booby traps that lend the game its title, though you'd be forgiven for thinking that you might have been searching for something else. Thankfully though, I can confidently assure you that all is well and wholesome here. The Booby Kids are named for their ability to identify and deactivate traps that have been buried around the levels. That's the basis of this port of the arcade game Kid no Hore Hore Daisakusen. That sounds less dirty, sure, although written down, it does say the word whore twice. Nishibutsu, the company responsible for Booby Kids, also released a similar game for the Game Boy 6 years later in 1993. Learning from their past mistakes, they changed the title this time around, and owners of Nintendo's famous handheld were instead treated to Booby Boys, which I think might actually be worse, so let's move along. Number 9. Blast Wind. Fast-paced scrolling shooters are great, right? It's gaming at its purest. Pilot a sweet spaceship, dodge incoming bullets, and lay waste to hordes of enemies while a badass electronic or rocking soundtrack plays in the background. It's a shame then that this Saturn shoot-'em-up has a name that sounds like what Grandma does after filling up on Brussels sprouts for Christmas dinner. It severely hinders that coolness factor, you know? Blast Wind was released only in Japan and features a storyline in which humans return to Earth following a nuclear winter, only to be attacked by mechanical lifeforms who have been living beneath the planet's surface. It's not entirely clear where blasting wind comes into the equation, but the ship's main projectile does kind of look like a windy blast, so we'll just have to assume it's that. Blast Wind was produced in limited quantities and was a port of an unreleased arcade game. As such, it's a bit of a curio and one of the hardest Saturn games to find, making it sought after by those with a predilection for collecting. It's therefore a rarity, unlike actual blasts of wind. Those are, unfortunately, all too common in this world. Number 8. Monster in My Pocket. Oh, is that a monster in your pocket, or are you just pleased to see me? This 1992 platformer for the NES took a popular 90s toy line and created a pretty decent 2-player action game out of it. Fans of the bendy plastic monster figures were delighted to be able to play as a vampire or Frankenstein's monster and defeat the evil warlock. Everyone else was left to do a double take at the title that sounds a lot like someone boasting about the size of their pocket monster. And we're not talking about Pikachu, not even Combusken, and look at him. The toy series featured incarnations of famous monsters and characters out of myth and folklore, from traditional creatures like krakens and hobgoblins to sinister personages like Spring-Heeled Jack and the Baba Yaga. Later on, it also depicted the likes of Ganesha and Hanuman as monsters, which got its creators into a touch of hot water, but that's another story. Anyway, the game was made by Konami, who were known for knocking out belters at the time, and reviewers mostly appreciated its simplistic but enjoyable gameplay and premise. A decent game then, and a good pickup for fans of the toy line, but nothing that's going to get the monsters in our pockets too excited. Number 7. Spawn in the Demon's Hand. If you take the subtitle of this arena battler on its own merits, it's actually quite poetic, telling the story of a character whose life is at the mercy of dark forces beyond his control. Add the name of Todd McFarlane's edgy creation, though, and think about synonyms for such a word, and things take on a somewhat messier tone. All semblance of drama is lost, and the demon instead comes across as quite accommodating, shall we say. Spawn in the Demon's Hand was released for the Dreamcast in 2000 and allowed players to choose from over 30 playable characters and take part in fast-paced, frantic battles. Game types on offer included boss attack mode, team battle mode, and battle royale mode. Characters can use guns, melee attacks, and demonic powers to destroy their enemies. Despite an action-packed premise though, reviewers and consumers were more or less unimpressed, with the game receiving average scores and making little impact on the sales charts. A PS2 port was planned but cancelled, which meant that Spawn-thirsty Sony fans had to wait until 2003 for Spawn Armageddon. Yes, those unfortunate folks missed out on getting familiar with the Demon's Hand altogether. Number 6. Super skid marks. Competitive racing can be extremely nerve-wracking to the uninitiated, approaching tight corners at high speeds, flying over jumps and swapping paint with other competitors. All of these things could result in some serious skid marks on the road and elsewhere. The inappropriately named Super Skid Marks was released in 1995 for the Amiga and the Mega Drive, and let's be honest, it sounds more like an unfortunate clothing accident caused by a particularly close call on the course than anything to do with actual racing. It is a racing game though, and not a cloth-touching simulator, and it allows players to race around wild, crisscrossing tracks from a top-down perspective. Developers Codemasters definitely embraced the zanier aspects of what could have been a fairly standard circuit racer. Not only did they name it Super Skid Marks, which they had to know was going to make people think of pants first and road second, but they plastered the joke cow vehicle all over the Mega Drive version's front cover. Imagine if Blizzard had done the same thing with Diablo 2's secret unlockable cows. They could have changed the face of gaming as we know it. Number 5. Age of Booty. The Age of Booty sounds like a glorious time to be alive, and this RTS for the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC gives players the opportunity to revel in this era. We're only allowed to view things from a distance though, which offers tragically little opportunity to get up close and personal with any booty that might be on display. We are referring to pirate treasure, of course, and we think that the game is too. While Age of Booty presents a cartoony, comical take on hex-based piratical strategy, there's very little that's cheeky or fan-servicey. Those heading into the game expecting saucy pirates in tight leather trousers will be left wanting. In fact, you're going to be spending the vast majority of your time staring at hexagons rather than curves, and you better get used to that fact. Said hexagons are filled with seawater, mountains, or clusters of pine trees, with the odd snazzy pirate flag to break things up a bit. Come to think of it, we're not really seeing much in the way of treasure either. There's very little booty on offer of any kind. It's a shame, because no matter what age you live in, high-quality booty is invaluable. And that's probably why pirates always seem so motivated. Number 4. Cougar Force. Cougar Force was released for the Amiga, Atari ST, and DOS back in 1990, and really tried to capture that 80s action movie vibe. A special agent, a criminal organization involved in the drug trade, martial arts, guns, the necessary ingredients are right there. Unfortunately, they all add up to a somewhat awkward and completely forgettable game. A game that would have zero relevance to us if it weren't for the beautiful evolution of the English language. Today, instead of a special agent's code name based on a cool and deadly animal, Cougar Force sounds more like a group of older ladies out looking for love, and the handsome lead character now becomes the hunted rather than the hunter. Sadly though, in its current form, there is nary a modern cougar in sight, but we're sure there's lots of talented modders out there, so you guys get to it, okay? Anyway, if the game were to be released now with the same title, it might attract an entirely different audience. They would likely end up disappointed to find that they're playing as another gunfighting martial arts hero instead of Auntie Janice and her single friends hitting the pubs on a Friday night. Come to think of it, I'm disappointed too. Someone make that game. Number 3. Hammerin' Harry. Here's something to ponder. Is Harry receiving or providing the hammer-in service? I'll let you interpret that in whatever way you see fit, but if you aren't predisposed to a bit of innuendo, you might be thinking the game is about some kind of toolbox-based violence, rather than other things Harry might be doing. Neither interpretation is exactly accurate, however, as the game is actually about a heroic carpenter. Released for the arcade, NES, and Game Boy in the early 90s, the game saw the wily woodworker take on a gang called the Rusty Nailers, which has its own connotations, let's be honest. Players guide Harry through various building sites and dilapidated locations, fending off goons with his hefty hammer, and ultimately saving the girl. Incidentally, there was also a PSP Hammerin' Harry game as recently as 2008, but this was called Hammerin' Hero, which we don't like as much. Hammerin' Harry just sounds like something I can really get behind, you know? No, not like that. Number 2. Seaman. Putting our sensible hats on for a moment, there's nothing really dubious about this game's name at all. In fact, it makes total sense. Well, as much as concepts like sense can be applied to games about fish with human faces and weird little legs. But yeah, if you're going to make a game about fish men that live in the sea, Seaman seems appropriate, right? Except, as legendary Arsenal and England goalkeeper David Seaman can surely attest to, spelling doesn't always matter when homophones can cause unruly cackling just as much as straight-up inappropriateness. Also, Seaman's creepily bizarre visuals, odd atmosphere, and off-putting voices all add up to an experience that feels unpleasantly surreal, and that's without considering the dodgy name. We're back to talking about the game again now, by the way, not David. If for some reason you did find yourself in a shop on the lookout for Sega's latest creepy fish 'em up back at the turn of the century, you probably found yourself being very careful about the way in which you asked the shopkeeper for it. At least Sega chose to use the singular when naming the game. If they'd gone with the plural, there'd be no two ways about it. And number 1, s.c.a.t. Alright, there's a lot to say about this game, but let's get this out of the way first. It's neither about the musical discipline, in which the voice is used as an improvised instrument, nor is it about the other thing you're thinking of. In this case, s.c.a.t. is an acronym that stands for Special Cybernetic Attack Team. Known as Final Mission in Japan and Action in New York in Europe, which also sounds slightly dodgy, this airborne side-scrolling shooting game pits its protagonists, named Arnold and Sigourney in the American version, tempting lawsuits, against an alien invasion. These predatory aliens have opened a rift in space in the ruins of New York City, hence the European title. I suppose the giant horror-depositing hole is what inspired the American title. No, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Oh no, let's not talk about stretching either. Anyway, the European version takes the s.c.a.t. acronym right out of the lore, too. The squad assembled to defeat the alien menace is known here as s.c.a.t, or Special Attack Team. It's a wise change, we think. Anything that gets us further away from s.c.a.t is alright by me. I mean, I have gone this far in the entry without actually explaining what the double entendre of that word is, haven't I? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Well, you see, it's all got to do with... Oh no, sorry. Looks like we're out of time for this video. Oh, thank God for that. I'll see you next time. Okay, see you later. Bye. Bye.